Hello one all, it's my review of My Hero Academia Vigilantes, Chapter 92, Might Signal, Take 1. And I find it particularly ironic that I spent so much of the last chapter gushing about how this would be the chapter. This would be the chapter we see the true All Might, the man with no limits, the hero who is basically a god, and yet this chapter shows that that person, that god, never actually existed. True All Might was never real. He was always an act, always a performance. As soon as the doors close, he deflates. He literally deflates even before his injury. That's what he has to do. He has to convince people that they're going to be safe by literally being larger than life. And I just freaking love it. And honestly, I find it a little sad. You know, All Might's doing all this to try to ensure the people that everything's going to be okay. Just further showing them, you know, that they aren't going to be okay, that this peace that he's created is only temporary, and that when he eventually retires or dies or whatever, things are going to go very, very bad for all of Japan. Though I do like that in his whole speech, he makes a comment about how, you see, it's also his other heroes, their myriad of quirks, who are out there protecting our society, as well as our hard-working civilians. He's trying to, you know, say, you know, it's not just me, there are the other heroes who are protecting as well, but they all know it's All Might. All Might is the only true hero out there. He is the god. He is the one keeping them safe. He's the reason they can sleep peacefully at night in their own beds, basically. And then we get to see Night Eye again. Yay! This poor man. Working tirelessly. I mean, All Might's been fighting villains and saving people for the last 72 hours. And he's the one that has to deal with all the paperwork from it, which, I mean, why? I'm sure Night Eye, you know, isn't as useful in the field as All Might, but they have a skyscraper. They have literally their own skyscraper, the All Might Agency. What exactly are the other people in that building doing? I mean, I'm sure there's PR, marketing, taking care of all the merchandise for All Might, but I feel like, you know, he could have an assistant or something helping him with his paperwork. I'm just saying. And then All Might's Might Sense activates, detecting danger from Osaka, which is interesting. I mean, I'm very confused by this part and what happens next, but his Might Sense, is that a continuation of the latest chapter of the series, which revealed that the fourth user of One for All had the Danger Sense ability? Is that ability passed down to All Might and he's activating without even realizing it? Or is it just, you know, he has a super hearing and that's what's triggering it? I'm not sure. That was kind of played as a joke, but I'm really curious about that. Oh, also, while I'm just talking about All Might having extra powers, is All Might's ability to puff himself up, is that a quirk? I mean, it's been theorized for a while now that All Might's ability to turn from his skeleton form to his hero form was in fact the result of a quirk he was born with, but like with the first user of One for All, it had no effect until it was mixed with another quirk. Because he got the power of One for All, he managed to activate his hidden quirk, and that allows him to change his body, change his shape, change his form. Because he also said that when he first got the power of One for All, he didn't have any trouble using it perfectly. He was able to almost instantly use it to its full potential. He just didn't have the fighting skills he needed to actually use it, though. I mean, so could that also be part of it? His ability to use One for All was also part of some innate quirk he had that he didn't even realize, and he still doesn't realize that he had? I think it'd be really amazing if Deku ends up unlocking that quirk down the road. Like, you know, all hope is lost, he's unlocked all the other quirks, he's got nothing left. He's got no ace up his sleeve, and then all of a sudden All Might shows up in the quirk realm, and he's like, "Young Midoriya, take my quirk as well. I didn't realize I had it, but here you go." And that's how he ends up saving the day. Oh, I would absolutely freaking love to see that. Anyway, then things get weird. Like, even in this series that's full of weirdness, they get even weirder, as all the signs and billboards and clowns start transforming into All Mights, signaling the Might Signal. What is this? What in God's name is the Might Signal? How exactly does this thing work? Why would it work like this? I mean, the chapter was called the Might Signal. I assumed, you know, oh, it's a big A in the sky, or text he gets, or something like that. Why are all the advertisements and everything else turning into All Might's face? How exactly is this signaling that All Might is on his way? Is it just telling other people that he's coming and to, you know, not crowd around him? I mean, there feels like there'd be so many better ways of doing this. It feels utterly ridiculous, and I am so very, very confused by all of it. So if you have any idea of exactly what the logic is behind that, please let me know. Anyway, even though he worked for 72 straight hours, All Might decides that he's still gonna go save Osaka because they're calling for him, and oh god, poor Night Eye. I mean, I'm assuming he's been up for, you know, the same amount of time that All Might has, dealing with the paperwork from all this. Oh, he's just so freaking tired. It makes so much more sense, why he ends up retiring after All Might's injury, because he can't watch All Might kill himself anymore. He's literally been watching it for years. Anyway, then back over to Overclock and Rappa, and they're like, alright, so now we basically won. We just need to wait for All Might to show up, but Overclock underestimated how absolutely freaking unhinged Rappa is, as he declares that he still wants to fight Hood. He still wants to fight this giant, messed up quirk villain monstrosity, and, Hood's up for it as well, so they decide that, alright, what the heck, we're just gonna keep fighting till All Might shows up. Oh, I freaking love it. I freaking love it. Anyway, then to buy them some time, All For One decides to quirkify a whole bunch of people in the arena and make them go crazy wild and just, cause a bunch of death and destruction to distract All Might, because of course he does. Though it does seem interesting that some of the people he targeted seem to be those who are working under him, who are working for him, his minions, if you want to call them that. He says he wants to save the research subjects, so maybe just going after, the people who work for him, he's having them go crazy, and he's gonna slowly start kidnapping everyone else around them, so that he can use them as subjects. Maybe they'll eventually become the Nomu that we see in the main series. Curious about that. This seems like a pretty bad decision, a pretty bad idea to make, given that it's gonna be very clear to All Might that someone who had the ability to give out quirks is behind all this. And who does he know that can give out quirks? I don't know. Maybe All For One? The only person in the entire world he knows that can give out quirks? And then he starts playing with blocks, which, okay, he's clearly insane. As he goes on a long rant about villains. And he does make a good point about that. They could just be called quirk criminals. I've always felt the term villain had too much emotional baggage behind it. It was too manipulative. Like, they were basically saying, anyone who uses their quirks without permission is evil. They are monsters. They have no redeeming quality in them, and they deserve to be in jail. While the heroes, the ones who keep them in order, they are above us. They are gods ascended to the land of man to save us. And that's just how the government, justifies the regular people not being allowed to use their quirks in their daily life. Because that would make them a villain, and clearly they aren't worthy of being called a hero. Anyway, then we goes on to say next is interesting? But when an extreme and violent will stimulates a quirk into running amok, or on the flip side, when an unruly quirk twists a person's will to its own end, that disparity creates a dangerous imbalance. The way he's defining this feels very, very strange to me. It's already been made very clear in the main series that a quirk contains a person's soul, more or less. Their memories, their personality, all of that. But the way he's defining it almost makes it seem like quirks have their own personality, their own will, and they slowly transform their wielder into becoming like them, into having a personality that matches their own. Kind of reminds me of this anime movie I saw a few years back, where there are all these people who can make fire, they're pyrokinetics and all this, and they have this overwhelming desire to burn things. Turns out their fire abilities come from aliens from another dimension who want to burn things, and their desire to burn things affects the host. So could it be like that? I'm not saying that quirks are aliens from another dimension, though they absolutely could be. I'm saying that a quirk has its own will, its own soul, and that it affects its user. Think way, way back to the flashbacks we've seen of young Bakugo. Before he got his quirk, he seemed like a nice enough guy. He didn't seem mean or violent or destructive, but that all changed when he got an explosive quirk. Did that quirk alter his personality and turn him into, Dynamite? Into the hero-ish person we know him to be today? And let's not forget Shigaraki. He seemed like a fairly ordinary guy, but when he got his destruction quirk, he quickly became a deranged sociopath. Or did he? Because All For One's next line is very interesting. Basically, forcing a person's quirk to rage out of control, or otherwise flipping their quirks around, destroys their balance, letting me turn anyone into a villain. Is it possible? This has been theorized for a while now, but is it possible that Shigaraki's quirk was not in fact what he was born with, but rather what was given to him by All For One to turn him into the monster he is today, to turn him into the symbol of destruction, because I think we can all agree, it's a little too convenient, a little too lucky for All For One that he just happened to find the grandson of his enemy, and that grandson just happened to have this incredibly powerful, destructive quirk. Don't forget, they even said in that flashback that Shigaraki should have already developed a quirk by that point, and if he hadn't, it probably meant that he was quirkless. So, could that be the case that he was actually quirkless, and Shigaraki gave him a quirk, gave him a power, and that's what turned him into the monster he is today? That's giving him that destructibility at a young age actually warped his personality and made him a monster. If so, that'd be just absolutely ironic and amazing. Just really shows duality because he gave Shigaraki a quirk and turned him into a villain, but he took away Deku's quirk and turned him into a hero. I mean, it definitely has been confirmed, yeah, that Deku had a quirk the doctor took from him, but seriously, Deku's doctor is All For One's doctor. There is no way on God's green earth that is just a coincidence. He had to have had a quirk way back when. The doctor saw it, the doctor realized its potential, and he took it from him. And I just don't know where that storyline's gonna go, but I'm super excited to see it play out. Anyway, then all the villains, spread out onto the street and cause just chaos and destruction and anarchy, and I freaking love it. Also glad that Mirko's staying around. I theorized that she was gonna, make a run for it. She was gonna, didn't want to get involved with this, didn't want her school finding out that she's, fighting in an underground fighting ring, so she's gonna, bolt. But now there are villains ramming through the streets, she's basically free to beat them all up, because technically, she was given permission by Overclock, by an actual hero, to, fight the villains, so technically she's still in the right here, more or less. I mean, the fact that she was actually fighting an underground fighting in the first place has kind of put a hole in that defense, but it's mostly justifiable, and I'm sure they'd look the other way, because she ends up saving the cops and a bunch of other people. Anyway, then Kurogiri serves as the voice of reason, admonishing All For One for being so reckless and dangerous, and I just freaking love it. I mean, that's exactly what Kurogiri is built for, made for, to keep Shigaraki in line. So it makes sense they do the same thing for All For One, who seems way more reckless than what I first thought. But basically, he just really wants to see this battle. He really wants to see Overclock fight against Hood to see what he's capable of. And more than anything, he wants Overclock's quirk. Now, we know for certain that he's not going to get the quirk now because we saw in that one flashback that Overclock lost his quirk after All For One lost his face. So, yeah, sorry, All For One, you're gonna lose here. But this is definitely how Overclock, got put on their radar and made him someone they wanted to keep an eye on, someone whose quirk they wanted to get down the road. And it's also quite possible this is how they ended up on All Might's radar. He saw this, he saw the villains go crazy, he saw the quirks being messed with and given away, and he realized that All For One was behind this, and that's how he managed to eventually track him down. Because of this starting point. I definitely think that might be the case, and I absolutely freaking love if that was true. Really tying these two series together. Anyway, a few other things we see. Fatgum's here. Good for him. Glad to see him back. I did not think he'd make another return, but, he's in the area, so it makes sense he's helping, evacuate the people, fighting the villains. I'm actually rather curious what he can do now. I mean, he's not fat. So he's not Fatgum. So he can't absorb blows. I mean, he did say he was basically like a knuckle duster, brawl-out fighter in the past, so I'm very curious about that. I'm not sure, though. Oh, also, All Might realized that he brought his pillow along with him, which is just, so absolutely freaking adorable. I love it. I mean, he hulked his way out of his nightgown, but he still had changed into his hero outfit before he came here, and he had not noticed that he was still holding on to his freaking pillow. I just absolutely love that. What do you think of this chapter? I mean, I thought this would be it. I thought this would be our big chance to see All Might fights in his prime, but it did something almost better than that. It shows that All Might was never the hero the world believed him to be. He always had this relaxed, deflated form, even before his injury. I'm just very curious. Now, in alternate timeline, if All Might never got injured but did start teaching at UA, would he have kept up his hero form, or would he have switched to his civilian form? I mean, there's definitely a lesson in that you can teach his students about how, they always have to smile, always have to ensure the people, the citizens, that it's going to be okay, that he's there, that he'll save the day. So they don't panic, so they don't freak out and just, start going crazy, running around like chickens with their heads cut off. I mean, he keeps up that form all the time, even in TV interviews, so I really don't think anyone else knew about that, except, probably Night Eye. So I'm just very curious if that transformation ability is a quirk or just a side effect of All For One, just a side effect of him, puffing on his chest like this. And what do you think about All For One's little speech? Do you think he actually gave Shigaraki the quirk, and as a result, twisted him into becoming a villain? I mean, it was said by All Might when he was first talking about All For One that, giving a person multiple quirks or changing their quirk could warp their personality, basically make them go insane, so that would definitely explain a lot about Shigaraki. I mean, especially if you realize that they're basically putting another person's soul inside his body. Yeah, that's gonna mess up a 5-year-old kid in a lot of different ways, but let me know all down below. Be sure to like, subscribe to this video. Until then, peace!